It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
Appreciate you listening to Red Eye Radio, and I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 89.7 WTN. Always honored to fill in for the GOATs, as I called them on Twitter this morning, and that is Gary and Eric, the greatest of all time, and always, again, appreciate the opportunity. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can, at Dan Mandis Show. I'm just getting the very latest on the murder rate in Chicago over this Labor Day weekend. Oh, the irony is just thick, really, if you think about it, because over the Labor Day weekend in Chicago, you heard this. You have a whole bunch of people that are chanting "No troops in Chicago." That's right. But as this was going on, as the chants were going on in Chicago, no troops in Chicago, 7 people, at last check, and maybe you've got something different, but at last check, 7 people were killed in Chicago. 54 people shot in Chicago as the mayor, Brandon Johnson, there in Chicago, swears up and down that they don't need any help. Clearly, though, they do. This was the very unpopular mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, as he was leading those cheers again over the weekend.
No federal troops in the city of Chicago. No militarized force in the city of Chicago. We're going to defend our democracy in the city of Chicago.
Right.
We're going to protect the humanity of every single person in the city of Chicago. No.
Yeah, so that is the mayor again, Brandon Johnson. And you know what's interesting is that it is so easy to just poke holes right through what this guy has to say. Now, one of the things that I mentioned was that he is extremely unpopular, and he is. I mean, Donald Trump mentioning on True Social over the weekend, he said that he is rated at about 6% favorability rating. He is not popular by any stretch of the imagination. His approval rating, again, is very, very low. But beyond all that, it is incredibly easy to poke holes through the really lame chants. And when you want to talk about saving lives in the city of Chicago, well, what you need to do is do what Donald Trump did in Washington, D.C., and obviously bring in the National Guard. Anybody who is honest about that conversation would admit that when you look at what's going on in Washington, D.C., when you look at the fact that lives have been saved in Washington, D.C., that is clearly what needs to happen in the city of Chicago, in the city of Memphis. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I host a morning show here in Nashville on WTN. You can find out more about me on all the socials at Dan Mandis Show. But when you look at what is going on in these cities, and I love how he says in that audio bite that I played, he said, oh, I'm, protecting the humanity of Chicagoans or whatever. No, you're not. There are 54 people been shot in Chicago over the Labor Day weekend. 7 are dead. And I hate to break it to you, friends, but, you got Black Lives Matter out there, and they're doing the whole chant, Black Lives Matter. Well, I'd be willing to bet that of those 54 people that were shot in Chicago, I'd be willing to bet that a lot of them were black. And so the question would then have to be asked, okay, so can I ask a question? Who protects black lives more? Donald Trump, the president of the United States, or Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago? I mean, oh, wait. I mean, if you want to think about it, you can. But it's obviously Donald Trump. I've been saying on my local show here in Nashville that when you look at which side is protecting black lives, that is clearly Donald Trump. Because there's a lot of shootings, there's a lot of murders that has not happened in Washington, D.C. because of Donald Trump bringing in the National Guard. And then you've got Brandon Johnson, of course, and also the governor for the state of Illinois, the fine state of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker. And both of them are fighting Donald Trump tooth and nail. A guy, by the way, Donald Trump, who is saving lives. But the Chicago mayor wants residents in his city, in my opinion, to be killed because he's not willing to work with Donald Trump, which makes him, I would say, and I said this on the socials, a dumb A. He's actually now signed an executive order that is banning local law enforcement and local politicians and local authorities of working with the president to save the lives of people in Chicago. Listen to this. This was over the Labor Day weekend.
I'm signing an executive order today that will launch the Protecting Chicago Initiative. This is a project that builds on the months of preparation that we have done that has led up to this very moment. This order affirms that the Chicago Police Department will not collaborate with military personnel on police patrols or civil immigration enforcement. We will not have our police officers who are working hard every single day to drive down crime deputized to do traffic stops and checkpoints for the president. We do not want to see tanks in our streets. We do not want to see families ripped apart.
You know, when he says, I don't want to see families ripped apart, well, what would you call the 7 people that were murdered in your town over the Labor Day weekend? That's what I would ask. What about the 54 people that were shot? I would say to Brandon Johnson or J.B. Pritzker. Because clearly they don't have a plan. He's all excited. He's all excited to sign this executive order banning local authorities from working with Donald Trump. But I guess the question would be, okay, but what have you done to stop the crime? I mean, all you have to do is go on the socials over the, over the last couple of weeks, as we have seen all of these military personnel, the National Guard, going into Washington, D.C. And you got all these people that are walking the streets and they're saying, hallelujah, we can walk the streets and it is safe. Washington, D.C., I firmly believe that Donald Trump, number one, he's using D.C. as a testing case. This really is an opportunity for the president to say, look, law enforcement works. Law enforcement save lives. As opposed to what, Brandon Johnson and some of these folks, let's say all of the folks on the left, when they say that they want to defund the police, you show me a city that has been calling to defund the police that has not had rampant murders and rampant crime. I mean, for that matter, show me a city that is a sanctuary city that is really doing well. And obviously there's different metrics, but for the city of Chicago, clearly, obviously, they've got a lot of issues.
We do not want grandmothers thrown into the back of unmarked vans. We don't want to see homeless Chicagoans harassed or disappeared by federal agents.
But shot is okay. Is that what I'm getting from you, Brandon Johnson, mayor of Chicago? Maybe at some point tonight I'll be able to I'll find the audio and I'll play it. But there was a moment, and it was last week, so I'd be willing to bet that Gary and Eric already played it. But there was a moment where even Joe Scarborough, last week, is great audio, where he kept asking Brandon Johnson, would 5,000 more police officers on the streets of Chicago help? And he wouldn't even answer the question. It was the craziest thing. But he continues.
And so this executive order makes it emphatically clear that this president is not going to come in and deputize our police department.
All right, so he's basically challenging Donald Trump, saying there's no way that we are going to work with the president on saving lives. That's what he wants. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I mean, if you live in Chicago, you know how dangerous it is. So all of this carnage is happening. President Trump puts J.B. Pritzker on full blast. This was earlier. Oh, by the way, have you seen this? Have you seen what's going on social media over the last, 3 days? Since Friday, I guess? The Democrats are trying to sell America that they've got concerns that Donald Trump hasn't been seen for a few days. That's what they're saying. Donald Trump has not been seen in 3 days, in 4 days, in 6 days. You know, forget about the fact that the president had a 3-hour and 17-minute cabinet meeting last week. And so I guess it was since Friday. Everybody got together, all the Democrats got together, and they thought, okay, so here's what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to just set the internet on fire, set the socials on fire. We're going to break the internet, but trying to convince the American people that something is wrong with Donald Trump. So we'll get into that because it's an absolute joke. But the president, yes, putting J.B. Pritzker on full blast as weak and pathetic on Saturday, warning that he'll deploy federal troops to Chicago if the Democratic governor of Illinois doesn't get the violence under control. And again, this is from the New York Post. Do you know what I think part of this is? I just want to get this out of the way right away. Because I live in Tennessee. Memphis is western Tennessee. And Memphis is a hellhole. I mean, there's no other way to describe Memphis. And if you live in Memphis, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I think part of what Donald Trump is doing is he's setting a trap. He's setting a trap for the Democrats. He's setting a trap for Brandon Johnson and J.D. Pritzker and all the Democrats. And what he's doing is he is basically, instead of going to a place like Memphis where, you know, Tennessee is run by a Republican governor and a very conservative state legislature. But Trump decided, no, I'm not going to go into Memphis. I'm going to make an example out of Chicago. Because the president knew that J.B. Pritzker and Brandon Johnson and all of the liberals in Chicago would fight him as he's saving lives in Washington, D.C. So now we've got J.B. Pritzker and Brandon Johnson and all of these Democrats that are out there screaming that Donald Trump is trying to, you know, federalize cities, take over the cities, and all of this other stuff. But the reality is that the people that live in those towns want this. It's just the elite politicians that don't want it. Because, well, it's Donald Trump. Orange man bad. President Trump slamming J.B. Pritzker as weak and pathetic on Saturday, warning that he will deploy federal troops to Chicago if the Democratic governor of Illinois doesn't get the violence under control. Pritzker has accused Trump of attempting to manufacture a crisis in Chicago, where, again, violence did continue over the Labor Day weekend. If you missed the opening of the show, the latest I'm seeing, 7 dead, 54 shot over the weekend in Chicago. Do you know what I guess my question would be? And you folks listening to us on WLS in Chicago, maybe you can hit me up on X at Dan Mandis Show. But how many deaths would a crisis be? I mean, clearly it's not 7. Is it 10? Is it 12? How many people have to die before J.B. Pritzker and the Democrats in Chicago will call what is happening there a crisis? I mean, inquiring minds want to know. Trump's fiery Truth Social post addressed a previous weekend of carnage in Chicago, where shooting left 6 dead and more than 24 injured between August 22nd and August 25th, last weekend. Trump saying 6 people were killed, 24 people were shot in Chicago last weekend. And J.B. Pritzker, the weak and pathetic governor of Illinois, just said that he doesn't need help in preventing crime, Donald Trump wrote. He is crazy. He better straighten it out fast or we're coming. MAGA, President DJT, the president added. By the way, the president, despite the fact that he has apparently not been around for the past, 3, 4, 5, 6 days, at least according to the Democrats. By the way, the president played golf on Saturday. So I'm telling you that the Democrats, grasping at straws they are, but the president does have some sort of a big announcement later on today. So we'll have to see what he has to say. My name is Dan Mandis. We'll return next. This is Red Eye Radio.
This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. Did you know that up to half of all major engine failures are due to poor cooling system maintenance? That's a lot of downtime and can cost drivers big. You expect a lot from your engine, which is why the cooling system must be a part of your maintenance routine. Here's a tip to keep your cooling system in shape and your engine running smooth. Make sure the system is properly filled with coolant at every PM interval and during pre- and post-trip inspections. Underfilling the cooling system can cause corrosion and your engine to overheat. Coolant is also used to keep DEF tanks thawed in the winter. If you notice unusually low coolant levels, be sure to have your cooling system inspected by a professional technician.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. Phone number 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. And that is where we find Eduardo on Red Eye Radio. Eduardo, thank you very much for calling in. Go ahead.
Yeah, Dan, I moved there from Chicago to Tampa 2 years ago, and I was telling your producer, all these mayors, L.A., New York, Chicago, all they want is money coming in from Congress. You had a neighbor of Mayor Johnson who was killed, Armel Smith. That shows you how much that city's in bad shape. $1 billion deficit. It's pretty ridiculous. Governor Hochul had the National Guard in the subway. Remember that? So I don't know what the big deal is about.
I do remember that, actually. Why did you, Eduardo, let me ask you a question. Why did you move?
The obvious property taxes, crime, the weather. My younger brother's still there in the same neighborhood that I was there many years. So he's still there. I still stay in contact with him. Yeah.
But you moved to the free state of Florida, and I bet you were a lot happier.
Very much. And what happens with that New York election with Madami, I think places like Tampa Bay and Naples are going to get very crowded next year.
Oh, yeah. You're right. And, Ron DeSantis, your governor there in Florida, is a favorite of mine, by the way. But he's predicting if Mamdani wins, you're going to see a whole lot of people end up moving to, as, again, Governor DeSantis is always calling it, the free state of Florida. Maybe coming up, I'll talk a little bit about, because you heard Eduardo talk about how all these mayors, they want all the funding. They don't want the actual bodies. They don't want the National Guard to come into their city. But what they do want is that funding. Do you know why they want the funding? Do you know why they want the funding, the federal grants for affordable housing? We'll talk about that and a whole lot more straight ahead. I'm gonna give you a hint, though. It's all about corruption. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. My name is Dan Mandis. You can follow me on the socials at Dan Mandis Show. By the way, I've opened up the super text line. If you want to chime in, you can do that. And that is 615-737-9986. So if you want to text me during the show, you can as well. Appreciate you listening to Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. Ian for Gary and Eric this week. Always an honor and a pleasure to fill in for the guys. By the way, the phone number again is 866-90 Red Eye. My text line that I usually use for my local show in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a morning show host. I'm using that this week as well. So if you don't want to call, you can't get through, whatever, but you want to drop a line and just say hello, 615-737-9986. So there's great audio out there, and we heard Eduardo call earlier. Used to live in Chicago, and he moved to the free state of Florida, and he talked about the corruption of the mayors. They're in not only Chicago, but you've got Kathy Hochul and a lot of these other Democrat mayors and governors all across America. And it does remind me, and Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, all over the place this weekend in Chicago as 7 people were murdered and 54 others were shot in his city of Chicago. He is leading chants, basically telling Donald Trump that his help in saving lives is not wanted. And so I believe that part of what's going on is Trump is choosing to focus on Chicago because he knows exactly what is going to happen, that the Democrat lawmakers and governors and so forth and the mayor, they will resist him at every turn as he is using the same tactic in Washington, D.C. to save lives. Do you know there's one person on the other side of the aisle, the Democrat aisle, that does seem to understand it, and that is Joe Scarborough. So I know that Gary and Eric, they played this audio, but I think it is definitely worth repeating because they talk about Morning Joe is asking Mayor Johnson, yes or no, would 5,000 additional police officers help save lives in Chicago? And he wouldn't answer it. And the bottom line is this, is that Brandon Johnson, he wants money. He doesn't want actual troops, no. Actual National Guardsmen, no. He wants the money. And he wants the money for affordable housing because he believes that that is the answer to the violence. He believes that that is the answer to the problems of Chicago. Do you know why he wants that money, friends? He wants that money because that money then is easier to launder. Because it's my opinion that Brandon Johnson is corrupt as the day is long. The entire state of Chicago, the entire city of Chicago, the entire state of Illinois, I believe is corrupt, but certainly Chicago. This is part of the conversation. You've got Joe Scarborough and also Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson refusing to even say that 5,000 law enforcement officers would help things in Chicago.
Would you also like to get federal funding to help put 5,000 more cops on the street in Chicago? Would that help drive down crime?
Well, look, policing by itself is not the full strategy.
No, I understand that. You've talked about the other things you want, and I said those are good and important programs, but I'm asking also, would 5,000 more police officers on the street in Chicago be helpful to go along with all of those social programs that a lot of cities are engaging in and having success with?
Well, look, here's the best way I can put it, Joe, is that in the 90s when I was in high school, we had 3,000 more police officers and we had 900 people being murdered every single year in Chicago. It's just not policing alone. Of course, we want more detectives.
I know it's not policing alone, but I know it's not policing alone. You've told me everything else you want. I'm curious, and this does come down to an ideological difference between people. Do you believe that the streets of Chicago would be safer if there were more uniformed police officers on the streets of Chicago?
I mean, he won't answer the question. And again, he keeps looking for that affordable housing money. Well, here's the thing. You grok this, you Google this. Is Chicago's affordable housing programs, are they corrupt? Why, yes. Yes, it is. The Chicago Housing Authority is one of the least efficient and worst managed of all of the housing authorities. In 2023, a University of Chicago report named Chicago as the most corrupt metropolitan area in America for the fourth consecutive year. Now, that's back in 23, but I'm reasonably certain that they haven't fixed things over the last few years. And the Illinois Housing Development, they talk about a lack of oversight and incredibly inefficient as well. That's what's going on in Chicago. So that is why Brandon Johnson wants more money for the affordable housing crisis in Chicago. It is a great way to funnel money to his cronies in Chicago. That's why he doesn't want the National Guard. He wants the money.
I believe the city of Chicago and cities across America would be safer if we actually had, affordable housing. Look,
okay,
I'm not saying that
that's not the question I asked. My question is, and I just need a yes or a no, do you believe the streets of Chicago would be safer if you got all of those other extraordinary programs put back into place, which do have a history of being successful, if that's complemented by having 5,000 more cops on the streets of Chicago?
You think he'll answer the question this time? As Morning Joe, red-pilled and all, is laying it out, let's say you got all of the other stuff that you want. Would 5,000 more officers on the streets of Chicago, like they're doing in Washington, D.C., would that help the crime rate in Chicago? Would that keep people alive? You think Brandon Johnson is going to answer this question truthfully? Nah.
I don't believe that we should narrow it down to just police officers, Joe, is what I'm saying. That is an antiquated approach. I'm saying we've invested in detectives.
Mr. Mayor, are you hearing what I'm saying? I'm agreeing with you that all of these other social programs are extraordinarily important. I just need a yes or a no, and then this will be the last time I ask. Would an additional 5,000 cops on the streets in Chicago help complement those programs to make Chicago safer?
Look, we are working hard to make sure that our police department is fully supported.
Wow.
I don't believe that just simply putting out an arbitrary number around police officers is the answer.
So there you go, Brandon Johnson, mayor of Chicago. And his approval rating, it is down to I'll see if I can look it up. I keep talking about the approval rating. I looked it up last week. It's really low. But that's why Brandon Johnson wants more money for affordable housing. Because, yes, it is a great way to funnel money to his cronies, his coffers, There's just a lot of ways to funnel that money. Through corruption, incompetence, whatever. And as far as the good people of Chicago, I mean, this has been going on now in Washington, D.C. for the last couple of weeks, where you do have people in Chicago and they're out there saying that they really do actually want the National Guard. I mean, look, I could do this all day long. I know that you've heard, if you are anywhere near the socials, then you know that these videos are out there. This was on CNN.
My first reaction was that this is a good thing. I think that the governor as well as the mayor should be on board with it just so we can get a bit more of security in Chicago the way that we need.
The crime has dropped since 2024. Do you feel like the city feels safer?
No, not at all. No, especially with the police being defunded. My first reaction was that this is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I could sit here for the next 4 hours and play audio from people in Washington, D.C., who are praising the Lord for Donald Trump. Then I could also play audio from people in Chicago who would be wishing and are wishing that J.B. Pritzker and Brandon Johnson and the Brain Trust in Chicago would allow the National Guard to come save their lives. This is, let me see here. This is Dan in Denver. Dan, thanks for calling Red Eye Radio. Go ahead.
Yeah, Dan, I was wondering, with all the incompetent elected officials nationwide, how hard would it be to initiate recall procedures? And if so, what does somebody or a group have to do to initiate those procedures to get these morons out of office and replaced with somebody competent?
Do you know what the crazy thing is, Dan? And I'm glad you brought this up because, Gavin Newsom, he survived a recall effort in California. And you're right. Here's the problem. The problem is that the people of these blue cities vote for people like Brandon Johnson. In Illinois, they vote for people like J.B. Pritzker. So on the one hand, you and I, Dan, we can sit here and we can say, why is it? Why is it the people in these cities don't rise up? It's because these cities, they have all of these Democrats and they just vote for a party. They don't vote for common sense. They vote for the same party over and over and over and over again, even though there are clear examples of corruption. There are clear examples of failure. And it is all over the city of Chicago, whether we're talking about the schools, whether we're talking about the crime, the murder rate, you name it. And in that clip from CNN, you heard the reporter say, well, crime is, not as bad as it was in 2024. It's still terrible. It's still worse than other cities.
The crimes have not been reported. That's how come crime rate is down.
Yeah. Not only that, you're right. The crimes have not been reported. They've stopped charging people for certain crimes. And let's not forget the Biden administration back during those very dark days, they changed the way the crime stats were to be reported to the FBI. And so a lot of cities just said, screw it. This is so complicated. This is, so riddled with incompetence that we're not even going to bother to report our crime statistics to the FBI. That was also, thank you for the reminder, Dan, that was also a very big part of it. So I think that on the one hand, and let me ask you a question, Dan, do you, because there's part of me that is, I'm not going to say I feel bad for the people of Chicago because they vote for this time and again. It's hard for me to feel sorry for people in Memphis, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, in Boston, and in Massachusetts. It's hard for me to feel sorry for the people who live in these cities because they know that these Democrats they're bass backwards. There's no other way to say it. Certainly they don't have an appreciation for law and order. So it is hard for me to feel sorry for the people of these cities and states because they vote for this time and again. Do you have any sympathy or empathy whatsoever for the people in these towns, knowing full well that not all of them are Democrats, of course?
I can sum it up in 4 words. You voted for this.
Yep, that's exactly right. And Dan, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much. And you have a good night. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Text line is open this week, 615-737-9986. If you don't want to wait on hold, but you want to say hello and chime in with your opinion, 615-737-9986. We will return next right here on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
$866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number. My name is Dan Mandis, in for Gary and Eric. Rusty checking in from Chicago, actually, on the text line, which is 615-737-9986. This is the line that I use for my local show in Nashville. I'm Dan Mandis. He says Brandon Johnson's latest polling consistently across the city is 26 to 28% in the most recent poll. Got better over the summer, but the 26 to 28% figure is consistent from neighborhood to neighborhood. I mean, his polling numbers, Brandon Johnson, mayor of Chicago, and his polling numbers were absolutely terrible back in October of 2024. A poll, actually several polls, had showed Johnson with a 14% approval rating and a net favorability of minus 56%. Of course, reason being crime, really high taxes, inflation as well there in the city of Chicago. They say in August of 2025, a University of Chicago Institute poll reported a 26% approval rating with an approval rating, with a 58% disapproval rating, 16% neutral. So that is terrible. 26% approval rating, 58% disapproval rating, and 16% neutral, yet Brandon Johnson not wanting to protect the lives of people in Chicago.
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. I am in for Gary and Eric, the text line. I'm using that. I'm a host in Nashville, Tennessee, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I host a morning show there. And we use the text line, so I'm using it here on the network, 615-737-9986. So if you don't want to call in, but you want to chime in, you can on that text line, 615-737-9986. There is a lot going on. I do understand that we just got done with a 3-day weekend. But for the end of a 3-day weekend, there is a lot going on. I want to play you some audio. Have you seen that Rosie O'Donnell had to apologize to MAGA? That's right. I didn't even know this was going on until earlier this evening when she got on the socials, and this is what she said. This is Rosie O'Donnell. Of course, you know she's very much of a leftist.
Hi, everybody. It's Rosie O'Donnell, star of the Flintstones. Listen, I have a cold sore. I know. Happens. Get run down, you know. Anyway, I know a lot of you were very upset about the video I made before I went away.
By the way, just you heard her mention the cold sore. So Rosie O'Donnell, I don't know what it is. And by the way, if you want to see this video, I've got all of these videos that and the audio that I play. Most of the time, there's a video attached. They are all on my X feed at Dan Mandis Show. Follow me there if you would. But somebody's got to teach Rosie O'Donnell how to do these videos. It is such an uncomfortable close-up. And she does. She has a cold sore, and it's like, beep, beep, beep. I mean, it's like right there. So she's got to acknowledge that, you know, as a talk show host, one of the things that I do is I always acknowledge the train wreck. And usually with me, there's at least a few a night. But you acknowledge it. And so she acknowledged the fact that she's got a big old cold sore that is right there just screaming at people watching the video. But that's not the big issue. The big issue is that she found herself having to apologize to MAGA.
I know a lot of you were very upset about the video I made before I went away for a few days. I didn't go online and haven't seen them till today. But you are right. I did not do my due diligence before I made that emotional statement.
Wow.
And I said things about the shooter that were incorrect. I assumed, like most shooters, they followed a standard MO and had standard, feelings of NRA-loving kind of gun people.
What?
Anyway,
okay.
The truth is, I messed up, and when you mess up, you fess up.
Sure.
I'm sorry. This is my apology video, and I hope it's enough.
All right, so she was talking about the shooting in Minnesota, but it got me really curious. It's like, okay, so what in the world did she say? What did Rosie O'Donnell say that would demand such an apology? So I went back and I watched the original sin, if you will, of what Rosie did. And this was, I guess, on the actual day of the Minnesota Catholic school shooting. This is what she said. And by the way, what I said on my post, if you want to see it or listen to it, you can find it on @Dan Mandis Show on X. But this is what happens when you have TDS so bad, you refuse to actually think before you post. This is Rosie O'Donnell.
And so about the Minnesota shooting, and it brought me right back to Columbine in 1999 when I just could not get it through my head that students in America were shooting each other in schools. And this was a church inside a Catholic school. And what do you know, it was a white guy, Republican,
wow,
MAGA person.
Wow.
What do you know?
She got this so horrifically wrong.
White supremacist.
How? I mean, she is very specific. Rosie O'Donnell is very specific. Because as you know, it turned out that the shooter in Minnesota was actually a dude pretending to be a woman who had written on his guns all kinds of stuff, including kill Donald Trump. And here's the crazy thing, is that information, that intel, that was known rather quickly. I was actually talking to a fellow talk show host of mine, and he even said, have you ever known the information to come out so quickly on a shooter? Especially one that was trans. And I said, no, this is actually very quick. So she posted and then ghosted.
Nothing has happened since Columbine. Nothing. The Million Mom March, nothing.
So that was Rosie O'Donnell. And so that's what she was apologizing for. The great thing is that in the apology, if you listen closely to that apology video, she talks about how it was, and I'm going to air quote this, your typical NRA loving, gun toting, all this kind of stuff. And the reality is, just going back to Chicago, can I ask you a question? And I don't even know the answer to this. So maybe I'm wrong on this. But how many gangbangers in Chicago do you think are NRA members? I mean, I'll wait, but I'm pretty sure that those dudes out there in Chicago who are gunning each other down, I don't think that they're NRA members. And obviously they don't understand what the NRA does or what the NRA encourages, which is the responsible use of firearms. So when Rosie O'Donnell is like, okay, so white guy, typical white guy, gun-loving, gun-toting white guy, white supremacist, blah, 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 blah. She couldn't have been more off. And again, not to belabor the point, but it was only a few hours later that we found out what the shooter was. Which is, yeah, okay, it was a white guy, but trans. So dude pretending to be a girl. And I'm not sure when the last time a Trump-supporting, NRA-supporting kind of person carried out a mass shooting at a school. I mean, I literally Googled it, and I couldn't find anything. And the shooter actually scribbling "kill Donald Trump" on his gun, that was known, again, within a few hours. And so where in the world did she... But here's the thing, is that people who are on the other side of MAGA, and by the way, I don't know if I fall into that whole MAGA category. I'm definitely a Donald Trump supporter. I call him out when he needs to be called out, when I believe that he's wrong on something. So I'm not sitting here like defending the honor of MAGA, although I think that we're far better than Democrats. But again, I don't know if I would consider myself a part of that MAGA crowd. I am very conservative, and I consider myself calling the play-by-play and the color commentary on what is going on in the world around us. But there are things that I disagree with Donald Trump on, like, for example, the 300,000 Chinese students that we all talked about last week. But where in God's green earth did Rosie O'Donnell get her information from? So she actually apologized. Now, there are some people that are out there, and they're saying, at least she apologized. And yes, I will agree with you. At least Rosie O'Donnell, at least she did apologize. But still, I think that's what happens when you don't think and you just post. And you are so riddled with Trump derangement syndrome that you make mistakes. And we've seen this with the media. We've seen this with politicians as well. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. That is where we find Mary Ellen calling from Chicago. Mary Ellen, thank you for calling Red Eye Radio. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. How are you, Dan?
I'm all right. Go ahead.
Okay. You mentioned earlier about Johnson here and, the corrupt officials. Well, yes, I could tell you because I've lived here all my life. I could tell you about that and the elections. Well, when Johnson, shortly after he got in office, it was known that he had, people saw how there was a room, like a closet, where he had all these gifts that all kind of people had given him gifts. And it's like, really?
Wow.
I mean, it was sort of odd, And then, we just knew the teacher unions. That was the only one who was supporting him. But anyway, let's go to the elections. You said that, or somebody said earlier that, we voted for this, Well, it was the teacher unions out there who got people out there to go and vote. And, we know our elections are corrupt because I was an election judge back in 2020. And I was setting up these machines, when you go and people vote. And I knew the brand because we were using Dominion van. And about the same time out there was a video, and it's still out there somewhere, because Chicago's under Cook County Board of Elections. And the Board of Elections, Cook County, invited them in, and they were giving a demonstration about these machines we were using. And the question was, are they connected to the wireless providers? Oh, yes, they are. And it's like, really? Anything connected to the internet, and I know, can be hacked.
Well, let me ask you this. Hey, Mary Ellen, let me ask you this. How powerful is the teachers union in Chicago? Are they pretty powerful? Like, do they basically, for Cook County, do they basically determine who the mayor is going to be?
Well, they did in that one and I know I had seen where they get the students out in the street that go downtown during, during busy lunch hour times. And, you would go down, and if you're doing business, it's like they're just mobbing the streets, with these protests where they
that's and it's crazy, Mary Ellen, and I do appreciate the call. It's crazy because when you see the people, this is the other funny thing, is that and I played some audio from a video in the first hour where you have Mayor Johnson out there, and he's leading a chorus of chants, basically telling Donald Trump that Chicago will not be militarized. The National Guard will not be welcome in Chicago. Okay. But then you pan around, and I think I saw, you go find it at Dan Mandis Show on X. You're going to scroll down a little bit, but you'll see the video. I saw like one black person in that entire video. And, of course, a lot of people will say, and I would be inclined to say it as well, a lot of those people, you know what they are, right? They're paid protesters. And we see these things. But as I've been saying throughout a good part of the first hour was about what is going on in Chicago, where over the Labor Day weekend, the latest numbers that I have, 7 dead, 54 shot. in Chicago over Labor Day weekend as Brandon Johnson is out there screaming that they don't need the National Guard as Washington, D.C. is doing really, really well. So we'll continue to cover that and a whole lot more. It looks like Donald Trump and RFK, they're both going after the pharmaceutical companies. We have that story for you and a whole lot more straight ahead. And, by the way, such a prime example of bias in the mainstream media. That is also coming up as well. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. My name is Dan Mandis, in for Gary and Eric. If you want to chime in on the text line that I'm using for my local show in Nashville, feel free to send me a text. Getting a lot of them from all over the country. That's always appreciated. 615-737-9986. We'll return next. This is Red Eye Radio.
Brought to you by FPPF. Fuel Power Max.
Owner-operators with authority generally have two options when it comes to sourcing freight. Brokers on the spot market or directly from the source, the shipper. As any trucker with relatively recent experience with spot freight knows, the highs of working the load boards can be really high. On the other side of that coin, however, when the market flips in favor of shippers, it can be tough to keep your business afloat working with brokers. The smallest carriers with direct customers, however, can hang on through tough times or even prosper, as long as demand for their customers' product remains at least somewhat stable. Owner-operators in it for the long haul make direct business with customers a principal goal. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more detail on this and many other topics.
Brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
All right, coming up, there is a lot to talk about with RFK Jr., and he is doing everything he can to battle the swamp there within Washington, D.C., and we'll talk about what is going on with NIH and some of the other health-related agencies there within the Trump administration, because there is a battle going on, and it is getting worse and worse by the day between RFK Jr. and what he wants to do with the vaccines and the vaccine schedule. You've got all of these scientists and doctors that are pushing back within those agencies. We'll talk about where all that is heading coming up on Red Eye Radio. Real quick, though, I want to say hello to Fabian in Chicago. Hey, Fabian, go ahead.
Yes, sir, Dan. Thanks for having me on. I have two subjects I want to touch with you and the listeners. One is in the past 3 days, ever since the mayor here in Chicago signed that stupid executive order, in my opinion, he's inciting an insurrection. Everything he says that comes out of his mouth is either race baiting, talking about slaves and the Confederacy and how he doesn't take orders from the president or the federal government. And the thing he did today, he had some kind of protest going on. He's going to screw himself up because the insurrection that he's inciting is probably the reason that the troops are going to come into Chicago. And like that movie, The Blues Brothers, they're probably going to come in like they did at Daly Center in the movie to City Hall. And another thing I want to touch on is they're always crying about the schools are not, their budget is screwed up.
Yep.
And in the 80s, when they instituted the Illinois lottery, it was supposed to be a percentage of every lottery ticket sale was supposed to go to benefit the school system. Nobody ever brings that up. Nobody says anything about that. But where is that money going? If it was intended, some of the profits to go to the public schools for education.
Well, Fabian, I don't know if you heard me. Fabian, I got to run, but I don't know if you heard me talking about the corruption in Chicago or the corrupt affordable housing apparatus there in Chicago. But the government of Chicago is incredibly corrupt. And that has been proven in study after study after study. And right now, Brandon Johnson is the one that is saying, oh, please send us federal money for affordable housing, because he knows that what he can do with that is he can just as easily squirrel that money away, not send it to the schools, not send it to or use it for affordable housing. But it can go to, for example, the unions. It can go to his cronies. It can go into his own coffers. But it's not going to go to solve the problem. And that is a problem for the city of Chicago and the people that live there.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric, utilizing the text line that I have for my local show here in Nashville, Tennessee. That phone number, 615-737-9986. Did you see that balloon hair Bernie Sanders is calling on RFK Jr. to resign as health secretary? And nobody likes, I'm not going to say that. Not a lot of people in Washington, D.C. like what RFK Jr. is doing. We're going to get into some of this because there is definitely a war that is waging. And by the way, Donald Trump is getting into this too. So I want to get right to the audio. Now, this is audio that actually I played on my local show on Friday. You know about the shooting that happened in Minneapolis. One of the things that I always ask in these times is, okay, so what do we know about the shooter? Please don't tell me about the gun. What do we know about the person that utilized the gun? Well, you know, I've always asked about the meds. I've always asked, okay, so what kind of psychotropic drugs is this person on? And he was trans, right? So guy pretending to be a woman, is he on any kind of puberty blockers or hormone blockers or whatever it is? What is he on? And then if this guy is, depressed, then what kind of antidepressants might be he on as well? And he might be on just a bunch of different medications. We just don't know. But RFK Jr., he is saying, and I think this is a great idea, where he says, you know what we need to do? We need to find out what these people who are walking in and shooting up schools, shooting up whatever, what are they on? These mass shooters. Please find out. Please figure out what is, and pardon the pun, triggering all of this.
I certainly consider mass shootings a health crisis, and we are doing for the first time real studies to find out what the etiology of that is. And we're looking for the first time at psychiatric drugs.
Yeah.
These kind of mass shooting, people have had guns in this country forever. So there's never been a time in America, in the history of humanity, and people walked into a crowd, into a church or a movie theater or a school or a crowd of strangers and just started randomly shooting. It's happening in our country. It's not happening around the world. And there are many other countries that have comparable levels of guns that we have in this country. We had comparable levels in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and people weren't doing that. Something changed.
Yep.
And it dramatically changed human behavior. And one of the culprits we need to examine is whether the fact that we are the most over-medicated nation in the world.
I mean, that is true. I mean, we could go down the road of vaccines, where the number of vaccines that our children are expected to take, massive, massive numbers. We could talk about the antidepressants. We could talk about all of the things that we are, as a society, and doctors and psychiatrists are prescribing our kids. And in RFK Jr., I do believe that he is correct. There's a lot going on with kids in our society these days. There really is. I believe that you've got the over-medication. You've also got, of course, all of the over-social media. You know, they're always scrolling. They're always thumbing stuff and typing things into their social media and so forth. That's a lot of what's going on with kids these days, locked in their rooms playing games or who knows what they're doing. But RFK Jr. is right when he talks about how many of our kids are obese these days, folks? And talk about that. In other words, there's something going on with our kids. And RFK Jr., he wants to know what it is.
And a lot of those are psychiatric drugs that have black box warnings on them.
Yep.
That warn of suicidal and homicidal ideation. So we are doing those studies right now for the first time, and we will have an answer.
I mean, I think that's really smart. And I love that RFK Jr. is looking at that. What kind of drugs are these people on? So I like that he's going to look at the psychiatric drugs that this guy and others may have been on, because I think that what needs to happen, if you think about all of the different mass shooters, what have they all had in common? And I don't know the answer to that question. Nobody really does. But all of the different variables, right? You've got broken families. You've got intact families. You've got highly educated, not so educated. You've got mass shooters that have been bullied, that have not been bullied. In other words, there's a lot of variables. And sometimes they're contradicting. But often the question is, what medications were they on? And that's always one of my biggest questions. Now, RFK Jr. is going to try to find out and get to the bottom of it. Now, the left is going to scream, oh, what about the guns? You know, those conservatives, those NRA-loving conservatives, those gun-loving conservatives, they're trying to take their eye off of the ball. It's all about the gun. And to me, no, it's not about the gun. And as JFK Jr. points out, we've always had a lot of guns around, but it's only been, fairly recently, 90s, late 90s, that these kinds of mass shootings have happened at schools. And obviously placing the blame on the gun, to me is silly, because the gun is an inanimate object. But what about the psychotropic drugs? What about the antidepressants? And so now the FBI, of course, as you may or may not know, they are investigating what happened in Minnesota as a hate crime against Catholics, as they should. But you know what? This dude hated everybody. He hated Trump. He hated Jews. Heck, the only people that he liked were other mass shooters. By the way, I love this headline. Former CDC directors casting RFK Jr. as dangerous in a New York Times guest essay. Now, I'm going to tell you where I'm going with this. Do you remember when Hunter Biden and that laptop from hell, remember that whole thing? And Donald Trump said to Joe Biden during that debate, the laptop from hell, and Biden was saying, oh, it's Russian disinformation. And you had the 51 former national intelligence directors and people that worked for the agency and so forth. And they all wrote that letter saying, oh, no, this has all the earmarks of Russian disinformation. Turned out they were lying. Remember all that? This reminds me of that. This is as reported by NBC. Former CDC directors casting RFK Jr. as dangerous in a New York Times guest essay. The essay, signed by 9 former directors and acting directors, comes amid a crisis surrounding President Donald Trump's firing last week of Director Susan Monterez. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s leadership, they say, is unlike anything our country has ever experienced. Okay. Is that a bad thing? Because there are a lot of people that will tell you that it's actually a good thing. 9 former directors and acting directors of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention wrote in a scathing guest essay Monday for the New York Times. The piece, which appeared online under the headline, "We Ran the CDC, Kennedy is Endangering Every American's Health," came days after President Donald Trump fired CDC Director Susan Monterez, Through her lawyers, by the way, Monterez has maintained she refused to sign off on reckless and unscientific orders. By the way, after she was fired, and by the way, she's swearing up and down that she's not out of a job, but whatever. 3 others quit as well. But can I just say that, this just seems eerily familiar, where you have all of these people within the swamp, I'll say it, the swamp, and they'll sign their name to these letters. They will call out either, hey, the Hunter Biden laptop is Russian disinformation. Lie. But this is why when I saw this headline, I didn't even think about it. It's like BS. Are they compromised? What are they trying to hide? How much money are they getting from the pharmaceutical companies? All of those things, because oftentimes these people that work within, the CDC, the NIH, they're in bed with the pharmaceutical companies. The pharmaceutical companies are the ones that make all the vaccinations. So that's a problem. And RFK has been talking about this for a long time. Anyway, the story continues. Kennedy's actions as the country's top health official, including his role in the firing of Monterez, is unlike anything we have ever seen at the agency and unlike anything our country has ever experienced, the former directors wrote. So what has Kennedy done or doing that is so controversial? Well, he wants all future vaccines to go through proper testing, proper vetting, including with placebos. He doesn't want any more vaccine mandates. Oh, the horror. No more vaccine mandates. I mean, listen, if you want to call him a vaccine skeptic, okay. I don't believe that being a vaccine skeptic is a bad thing. I'm telling you where I'm at right up front. One thing that he did do, RFK Jr. did do, was he fired all 17 members of this advisory committee on vaccinations. I think that he felt like they were too pro-vax. He also more than likely saw them as being compromised by the pharmaceutical industry, because there's all these stories out there about this revolving door between the pharmaceutical companies and the CDC, the NIH, and so forth. And so if you think that your next gig is going to be with a pharmaceutical company and you're sitting on this advisory committee on vaccinations, do you really think you're going to push back on Pfizer's next big vaccine? No. No, because you know where your next gig is coming from. That's what Kennedy has been talking about. And the truth of the matter is that the number of vaccines has skyrocketed over the past few decades. Kennedy has said that in the past. There is a total of 50 doses of vaccines that kids are supposed to get by the time they turn 18 years old. 50. It's grown massively over the years to protect against, they say, 17 different diseases. And you know who makes money on all that? The pharmaceutical companies, obviously. Now, just to let you know that I know the other side of that argument is, well, because of advances in technology and we've learned more about these diseases and we've become better at, manufacturing vaccines. Dan, that's why there's so many vaccines. That's why there's so many doses. Okay. To each his own. But I was vehemently against, and I mean vehemently against, the vaccine mandates. But to Kennedy's point, and I played you the audio just a few minutes ago, look at the challenges that kids have today, right? As they are taking 50 doses of vaccines from birth until the age of 18. Obesity is at an all-time high in kids. Shootings continue to rise. You have all of these kids claiming that they identify as trans. And depression among kids is also really high. So there's something going on, and RFK Jr. is trying to figure that out. We'll have to see if he is able to come up with anything. The text line is 615-737-9986. We'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
#866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. My name is Dan Mandis, in for Gary and Eric this week. They will return next Sunday night, Monday morning. By the way, this morning we are using my text line that I use for my local show in Nashville, Tennessee. I am a morning show host on Super Talk 99.7 WTN, and you can hear that Monday through Friday. That would be 5 to 9 Central Time. And you can find us on all the streaming platforms. We also broadcast on YouTube and X and 997WTN.com, among others. And so if you've always wanted to see what a radio show looks like as it's going on, well, you can check us out there. And we have a lot more straight ahead right here on Red Eye Radio. By the way, follow me on the socials, if you would, at Dan Mandis Show. Got a lot more straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. You can always follow me on the socials. I would actually appreciate it. At Dan Mandis Show, and Gary and Eric, they return next Sunday night, Monday morning. It is always a pleasure and an honor to fill in for the mighty Red Eye Radio. So we had a guy call up, and it was at the end of the last hour, but he was taking issue. Now, he didn't want to wait, and that's fine. But apparently he took issue with the fact that I said at some point during the broadcast, I don't know exactly what I said, but I said that there are paid I was in Chicago. A bunch of people protesting in Chicago regarding, Donald Trump and the president talking about bringing the National Guard into Chicago. And I made some comment about, well, they're probably paid protesters. And the guy who called, I think his name was Anthony, but he didn't want to hold, and that's fine. But apparently he took exception to me saying that those protesters were paid. And he's basically apparently saying there's no evidence. There's no evidence at all that people are being paid to protest. Really? I mean, if you spend any time on this topic and any time on this issue, you know the name Adam Swart. He is the CEO of an outfit called Crowds on Demand. And he's on the record. He's on record as saying, oh, yeah, that is what we do. You want to earn some money and go out and protest and, hold one of our signs? Well, then we'll pay you whatever it is, a couple $100. I have no idea. But we've seen the signs. We've seen the ads where people can come out and get paid to go out and protest. I mean, it's something that happens all the time. I mean, if you don't believe me, well, then believe News Nation, because they did an interview with Adam Swart, CEO of Crowds on Demand.
Have the organizers of the July 17th demonstrations approached you?
Interests aligned with the organizers of the July 17th movement have approached us. And in fact, we rejected an offer that probably is worth around $20 million.
$20 million?
Correct. I mean, this is a nationwide thing, right? It's not to say I would have made $20 million personally, but the value of the contract would have been worth around that amount nationwide.
All right, so nationwide. So the CEO of Crowds on Demand turned down, good for him, I guess, but whatever, $20 million to staff protesters for anti-Trump rallies. So, yeah, paid protesting, that is a thing. And it's especially a thing on the left. So, yeah, this is something that is going on, and this is something that the Republicans and Donald Trump are having to deal with, is all of these paid protesters. And the whole point was, in that video that I was playing earlier, and if you want to see the video, follow me on the socials at Dan Mandis Show. You had all of these people out there in Chicago, and I'm not going to revisit the Chicago topic right now, but you had all these people in Chicago that were railing against Donald Trump and his use of the National Guard going into Washington, D.C., even though on this Labor Day weekend that is just wrapping up. In Illinois, they had 7 people shot and killed and 54 people shot. And that was at the last check. I don't know what it is now, but I mean, that was what the numbers were when I got on the air this morning here on Red Eye Radio. So, yeah, paid protesting is a thing. I mean, let's all be honest. I mean, right now, the Democrats are not looking good. The Democrats have a lot of problems. I mean, how good do things have to be going in America that you have to come out, you have to go out and you've got to pay people to come out and protest? And I think there's a lot of things that are going on right now that the Democrats, things are just not going their way. They're not going their way at all. And that is a big issue. You know, you folks out in California, just this example alone, listen to this headline. This is from the Daily Mail. Playboy. Yeah, I guess they're still around. Playboy is moving out of California. Yep, believe it or not. You know what they've done? They've opened a stunning headquarters in Miami Beach. Yep. You know why? Because California, thanks to Gavin Newsom, thanks to the woefully left-leaning state legislature, they've made it so incredibly difficult to do business in California. They said, screw it. Playboy in our headquarters, we're going to move to Miami Beach. I host a morning show in Nashville on Super Talk 99.7 WTN, 5 to 9 Central. Check it out. We're on all the streaming platforms. We're on, you can also watch the show on YouTube and Facebook and myriad of other places. But, I'm in Nashville, and In-N-Out is moving their corporate headquarters to Middle Tennessee. And their corporate headquarters right now is in California. And so some, not all, but some of their operations are moving to Tennessee. Playboy moving to Miami Beach out of California. They say, and again, this is from the Daily Mail, the once iconic nude magazine, which was founded in Chicago in 1953 by Hugh Hefner with $1,000 from his mother, is making a major move as it seeks to clean up its tarnished image. Playboy has announced that it will relocate its global corporate headquarters from Los Angeles to Miami Beach to start anew. The company moved its headquarters to Los Angeles back in 2011 and was also partly run out of the infamous Playboy mansion during Hefner's life. But now the company is moving. You know why? Because California is anti-business. And they say Florida is pro-business. And I guess the question has to be this. With Gavin Newsom, whenever Gavin Newsom, because he's running for president, right? We all know that Gavin Newsom is running for president. And business after business after business after business is moving out of California. You folks that have heard me either in Nashville, maybe filling in around the country, certainly here on Red Eye Radio, I've talked about how I am I'm like an expat from California, if you will. I used to live in California, born and raised there. lived a lot of years in California, of course, as an adult as well, before I left. I left a really good gig. You know why? Because I couldn't stand living there anymore. And it's only gotten worse. Ben Cohen, chief executive of Playboy, telling the Los Angeles Times, "We are excited to move the company to the city of Miami Beach, which has been phenomenal to deal with, very pro-business." When you look at the cost of doing business in California against the cost of doing business in Florida, and you combine that with the energy of Miami Beach, it made all the sense in the world for Playboy to move to Miami Beach. I mean, think about everything that's going on in Los Angeles, right? I mean, you people in LA listening to us on KABC, you know that things are really bad out there. You know, there's a lot of illegal immigration. There's a lot of drugs. There's a lot of crime. And there's a lot of soft on crime policies. And there's a lot of regulations. I mean, there's all kinds of problems with California. And, of course, one of the biggest ones, in my opinion, is the fact that it is a sanctuary state. So for Playboy, it made all the sense in the world. The relocation also includes plans for a new Playboy club featuring a world-class restaurant and a chic members-only space inspired by the storied Playboy mansion, but not copied from it. And so, you know, listen, Playboy doing what so many other businesses have done, and they're fleeing California. And, you know, the more that we see these California companies, whether it's companies, whether it's people moving their families, that looks bad for Gavin Newsom. Because in a couple of years, Gavin Newsom is going to hit the campaign trail. Gavin Newsom is going to be running against either J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio or Ron DeSantis. And you look at those three, and there might be somebody else coming down the pike as well. But you look at those three, maybe Vivek Ramaswamy, who knows? There's lots of good Republicans out there. And Gavin Newsom, with all of these stories, it's black eye after black eye after black eye for Gavin Newsom. And so then the question that we're all going to be asking coming up in 2028 is, do we want America to be more like California, or do we want America to be more like Florida? I know what I would say. I know what a lot of you folks would say as well. The free state of Florida. And so many people have moved there. So for me, you know, when you look at what's going to happen, and we could talk about the whole gerrymandering battle between Texas and California and Massachusetts and all of that. But obviously, really the stuff's going to hit the fan coming up in 2026 with the midterm elections. That whole gerrymandering thing, that is still playing out. Somebody was telling me I have this text line that I'm using this morning, and that is 615-737-9986 if you don't want to go on the air. But, you know, people are telling me from California, there's actually, apparently, and you people in California can tell me this, but apparently there is an ongoing effort to recall Gavin Newsom in California. I mean, part of this is all you got to do is look at the report card of each individual state that is involved. You know, that's why I think that you have, you know, the Democrats looking for their knight in shining armor. They need somebody to help them. And they are engaged right now in some really serious wishful thinking. Over the weekend, I don't know if you saw this, but over the weekend, there's all of these rumors, all of these ideas that are being put out there by the Democrats that Donald Trump, something's wrong with him. that the president hasn't been seen in, this was on Friday, right? The president hasn't been seen in days and days and days, and obviously Donald Trump is dead, right? Donald Trump is mentally ill. Donald Trump is losing cognitive function. You know, and obviously the clear, obvious thing to say is, wow, they're awfully concerned about Donald Trump when they had nothing to say about Joe Biden. But this was all over the place on Friday. So Donald Trump, of course, played golf on Saturday. And on Tuesday, today, Donald Trump is going to make some sort of an announcement from the Oval Office. And so we'll find out what the president has to say. But it's so crazy what they're doing, what these Democrats are doing. Do you know what they're doing? So Trump has been posting on True Social over the last many days, right? He had that big, long 3 hours and 17-minute cabinet meeting. That was televised, and then he's been posting on True Social. But he has been keeping a low profile. And they're actually looking at Donald Trump's Truth Social posts, and they're saying, he used this word here. He used that word there. He's never used these words before. Obviously, this is not Donald Trump. Obviously, this is someone else. It doesn't match the typical tone and vernacular when it's the president himself thumbing these messages, right? That's part of what they're doing. And now they're trying to say that there's clearly something wrong with Donald Trump. So Trump, of course, in true Trumpian fashion, he is going to have some sort of an announcement that he's going to be making from the Oval Office today. And I'm sure you'll be able to hear it and see it anywhere that you go throughout talk radio today. This may be a pretty big announcement. We'll have to wait and see if it's more tariffs. There's actually talk that the president is going to go into Venezuela. We'll talk about that as the evening continues to transpire. My name is Dan Mandis. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Again, the text line, 615-737-9986. I'm Dan, in for Gary and Eric. We'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. And I got to tell you that I've got some great audio of Jasmine Crockett. Now, you know Jasmine Crockett, right? I mean, the Texas Congresswoman. And I usually call her private school Jasmine. Because, you know, she went to a private school, you know, she was very middle class and higher. It depends on who you listen to, maybe upper middle class, whatever. But apparently Jasmine Crockett has now found a new voice. This was at some sort of a political thing over the weekend. Brace yourself. Listen to her. This is Jasmine Crockett.
Baby, because these people, they are crazy because they always talk about how Christian they is. Yeah, I don't know how many of them on that side are getting divorced because they getting caught up sleeping with their co-workers, staffers, interns, all the things. Yeah, you ain't got to believe me. Just go Google. You'll find some of it. I'm telling you. And the wives is being messy and petty. They putting it in the divorce. I'm like, ooh, that's got to be true because
Yeah, that is Jasmine Crockett. Now, it's like she's purposely sounding more and more ignorant. Now, you know that if you've ever listened to Jasmine Crockett speak, if you have ever watched, various interviews that she has given where she's actually not talking so street. I mean, I want you to think about this. When you look at Jasmine Crockett, I just played you her over the weekend. Listen to this.
First of all, it's good to see you in the new year. You know, no one could have told me that when I went down to Austin, now looks like
she sounds like a literate person.
Running for Congress. It's just not what my plan was.
I mean, how in the world? So she goes from, college, private school Jasmine, to street Jasmine very easily. And the more that she does that, the more, in my opinion, the more credibility she loses. And people are joking, saying, oh, this is the future of the Democrat Party. Now, I do understand that, and I forget what you call it, but basically where if you are black, this is from what I understand, if you are black, then you can speak one way if you're talking to one group of people. Like, for example, she's talking to somebody about running for Congress in that one interview, years ago where she is private school Jasmine. And then she breaks out with,
These people, they are crazy because they always
that.
How Christian they is. Yeah, I don't know how many of them on.
And what's so weird is that nobody, if I'm in that audience,
with their co-workers, staff,
and she's throwing that down,
all the things.
I would think, is this really what you think of us? Is this really how you think you can identify and connect with us? I mean, it's crazy. But she does it, and she gets away with it. And so people are now, of course, they're comparing this to Hillary Clinton, because remember, Hillary, she used to have a million different accents. I think she was the one that said, right, she carries hot sauce in her purse, if I remember correctly. So this is something that clearly, for Jasmine Crockett, authenticity is always key in politicians. And there's absolutely nothing authentic about Jasmine Crockett. But you know what? A lot of people are saying that she is the leader of the Democrat Party. Got a lot more straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden Ameristudios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Yes, indeed. I'm in for Gary and Eric all this week. They return next Sunday night, Monday morning. I do have the text line for my local show in Nashville, Tennessee, open, 615-737-9986. If you don't want to call in, but you want to chime in, you can text us, and I'm reading all of them as they come in from all over the country, 615-737-9986. All right, so I spent a little bit of time, just a little bit of time, because I don't believe that she's really worth a lot of time, but I spent some time playing you audio of Jasmine Crockett, where she is, she's a private school Jasmine, and then she is street Jasmine, and, two very distinct personalities, and it tells you that Jasmine Crockett essentially is a fraud. Rashida Tlaib, holy smokes. So I don't know if you heard, and, kind of picking on the squad tonight, but, why not? Rashida Tlaib was at this event called the People's Conference for Palestine, I guess. And I want to play for you. And again, you can see all of these videos that I'm playing the audio from for you here on Red Eye Radio. Follow me on X at Dan Mandis Show. You'll be able to see all the videos that I am playing this evening. And this is, as I call her on X, follow me at X at Dan Mandis Show. The ever so charming Rashida Tlaib. This is what she had to say about America and our support of Israel. Listen.
They thought they could kill us, rape us, imprison us, violently uproot us from our olive tree farms, starve our children to death, and we would disappear. Well, guess what? Now we're in Congress, and we're every corner of the United States. Y'all, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. They will never truly comprehend, even after 7 decades, that we aren't going anywhere. We are just getting started. I want to say to all of them, every genocide enabler, look at this rooms, motherfuckers. We ain't going anywhere.
Ah, there you go. You've got to throw down. An F-bomb to get that crowd really excited. So that is Rashida Tlaib. Again, charming. Conveniently, by the way, forgetting that Hamas slaughtered 1,200 Israelis, or that Hamas steals the food and the aid that is provided to the people of Gaza. Then she, of course, conveniently forgot about that. Had nothing to say about that, but that is what's going on. You may have heard that there's a group that is accusing Israel of legal genocide. This was something that came up over the last 24 hours or so. And that Israel's actions in Gaza against Hamas and the killing of Palestinians meets the definition of genocide. And so now the U.S. and Israel, and of course that came down again. These are like scholars in genocide. I forget what the organization is called. And they say, oh, yeah, what Israel is doing in Gaza, that does meet the legal definition of genocide. So Israel is doing that. And I thought, well, isn't that convenient that they're doing this at the same time that there's this big, I don't know what the heck it is, this convention for the Palestinians or whatever. So same day, it's all coordinated, it's all orchestrated. And so I'm sure you're familiar with everything that's going on in Gaza, but basically the bottom line is that Israel was attacked, 1,200 Israelis, women and children, brutally raped, brutally murdered. I mean, we all know what happened. And so now what Israel is having to do is having to root out Hamas. Israel has to do everything that they possibly can to destroy Hamas so that there won't be another October 7th. And so honestly, I don't necessarily believe that Israel cares all that much about what these scholars have to say. And listen, I know that not all of you are supporters of how much the United States stands by Israel, and I do understand that. It's a very controversial conversation. But we do get, just so you know, we do get intelligence out of Israel from the Middle East. I mean, that to me is incredibly important. But there are cracks beginning to show in America's support for Israel. Donald Trump not real happy with Benjamin Netanyahu. I've been reading about that over the last couple of days. But the bottom line is this. As it relates to Israel and, they're committing genocide, you do realize that with Hamas, what they do is they hide their weapons and they hide their hostages underneath hospitals, underneath schools, underneath residential areas. And they use people as human shields. And that's only part of the conversation. Marco Rubio. And let me tell you something. I'm a big Marco Rubio fan, especially since he took over as Secretary of State. And you can find this, and this is somewhat of a visual. So I want you to go check it out at Dan Mandis Show on X, where he is verbally accosted coming off of a plane by some backpack-wearing person who is asking the Secretary of State, will you call for a ceasefire in Gaza, and are you worried or concerned about all the children dying? Listen to how Rubio absolutely puts this woman in her place. And Hamas, listen.
Senator Rubio, will you call for a ceasefire
No, I will not.
in Gaza?
On the contrary.
Senator Rubio,
are you filming it?
Wait,
so I want you guys to get this. I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes. And I hope you guys post that.
And what about the civilians that are being killed every day?
Hamas should stop hiding behind civilians, putting civilians in the way. Hamas knew that this was going to lead to this. So Hamas should stop building their military installations underneath hospitals.
So you don't care that 15,000 have died? You don't care about the babies that are being killed every day?
I think it's horrifying. I think it's terrible, and I think Hamas is 100% to blame. That's what I think. Make sure you post that, please.
I love that, too, because he gets right into the camera. Is this filming? Is this filming? And listen, the Secretary of State, he's absolutely right on that. And so, when you have these folks on the left and they say, oh, don't you care about the children being slaughtered? Absolutely. Of course we do. But will Rashida Tlaib or, the people that are out there, anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, will they ever admit that Hamas is hiding underneath hospitals, hiding underneath schools, hiding their weaponry in schools, stealing the food, stealing the aid that is being provided by Israel and the United States and the United Nations? Because that's what's happening. That's what is going on. Rashida Tlaib won't admit that, obviously. Ilhan Omar certainly won't talk about that. But that is what's going on. Representative Clay Higgins tweeted this out. Gaza is only 25 miles long and 5 miles wide. The weather is perfect, and it's on the Mediterranean Sea, where every year 2 million tons of fish are harvested. 1.8 million people live in Gaza, and they've received $20 billion over the years. And they're still, obviously, having a lot of issues there. He says the culture is ancient, and by their own accord, the people are brilliant. Yet, despite living in a land of abundance, the people of Gaza are impoverished and starving. I'll give you 3 reasons why, he says, Clay Higgins. Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. Now, you know what the thing is? The thing is that for representatives like Clay Higgins, they'll say, oh, well, they're bought and sold by AIPAC. Well, here's my answer to that, because the left, they're always talking about how, the Jews run Congress and AIPAC owns all of these. And by the way, if you don't know, AIPAC is it's an Israeli, I don't know. It's a legal thing, but basically they are an advocacy group for Israel. And they make a lot of political donations. And so they'll say that a congressman like Clay Higgins is owned by Israel. Well, the reality is they can just, AIPAC and Clay Higgins, they can agree on the same things. And I don't know if AIPAC is, I don't believe that they're violating any laws by contributing to, these various, Congress people on both sides of the aisle. But if they're not breaking any laws, okay then. But the fact of the matter is, I just wanted to call attention to that because I know that there's people listening right now screaming at the radio. Oh, he's owned by AIPAC. I don't think he is, but whatever. But I just want to acknowledge that the accusation is out there. But you also have to acknowledge that Hamas is still holding hostages. Remember the other day, this was a couple of weeks ago, where Hamas actually, I think it was either a video or a picture, I don't remember which, but they posted a picture again or a video, but it was a guy who was really, really skinny, clearly starving. He's an Israeli prisoner being held by Hamas, clearly malnutritioned, and he was digging his own grave. That's what they said on the post, that this Israeli prisoner was digging his own grave. And they posted it, like it was a joke, like they were getting glee out of the fact that this poor guy who had no energy because he's being starved by Hamas is digging his own grave. And by the way, Hamas has been accused of falsifying data when it comes to casualties. Yeah, that's right. Last year, Tablet magazine said that Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry distributed false casualty figures because you got all these people running around saying, oh, all these people are dying. Well, people are dying, but it's Hamas's fault. But they've been known to lie about the casualty figures. They're exaggerating the claims that they're making about how many people are dying. So Tablet magazine comes out with the accusation that they are distributing false, exaggerated casualty figures. Right after that, the United Nations said, oh, we might want to take a look at this. And you know what the UN did? They revised their estimates of women and children killed those numbers, those estimates went down. And they also had to admit, the United Nations had to admit that Hamas doesn't distinguish between their own casualties and those of Gazan civilians. And the United Nations also had to acknowledge, forced to acknowledge, that they had incomplete information and adjusted down its reports of deaths among women and children in Gaza per the BBC. In other words, you got all these people that are, full throttle gunning for Israel. They're engaged in a genocide, when the reality is that Israel has got to do what it's got to do to protect its own people. Because remember, if Hamas and all of these other nations that hate Israel put their arms down, there would be no more war. But if Israel put their arms down, there would be no more Israel. And that's what they're battling in the Middle East, is enemies that feel like Israel doesn't even have a right to exist. So that's part of the conversation today. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. My name is Dan Mandis. We'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE. By the way, this courtesy of the Daily Mail, Gaza, you've heard this before. Gaza will be turned into a tourism resort with the entire 2 million people strong population, they say, voluntarily moved to another country under a plan circulating within Donald Trump and his staff. Now, this is a familiar story. This was a couple of months ago that this story originally came out. And now this is another version of that story that came out just in the last couple of days. They say the Palestinian territory will turn into a trusteeship administered by the U.S. for the next 10 years, becoming a hub of high-tech manufacturing and technology. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more straight ahead right here on Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
Phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. We're using the text line that I use for my show in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm using it for the network here, 615-737-9986. If you have something to say, but you don't want to call, I am watching the text line. A lot of great input this morning. And at the end of the last hour, I was talking about how Israel, and I'm not going to go backwards too much, but I was talking about how Israel has now been accused of engaging in a genocide against the people of Gaza. And, of course, I talked about how Hamas has been, using the people of Gaza as human shields, and how Marco Rubio and a lot of people will blame Hamas for the carnage in Gaza. And I'm among those people that I believe that it is the fault of Hamas. So the Washington Post is now reporting on this plan to turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. Now, this is familiar territory because we've been talking about this for a long time. Do you know why I don't believe this is actually going to happen? Now, somebody want to flag the tape and, Amanda's prediction gone awry? I don't believe this is going to happen, because if they're going to somehow move the 2 million people that live in Gaza voluntarily, transfer them to another country, can I ask a question? Where are they going to go? Because other nations around Gaza do not want them. Do you know why? Because they try to take over the governments of those nations that they are shipped off to. So that's number one. And number two, do you really think, and I could be wrong here, I could be completely off base, wouldn't be the first time, but do you think that the people that live in Gaza, you get a whole bunch of people in there and they're building, I don't know, whatever, hotels and casinos and, everything that the West is known for? Do you really think that the people of Gaza and Hamas would let that happen? It would be in my opinion, it'd probably be very dangerous, not only for the people that are building these, temples of capitalism, but also the eventual customers. Like, would you go to a Gaza Strip that was, ultimately rebuilt as the Riviera of the Middle East? I think it would be really dangerous. Because as long as you've got those Palestinians out there, you know what they're like. You know what Hamas is like. And the Palestinians voted Hamas into office. The Palestinians celebrated the day after October 7th. So I think that if they try to build this Riviera of the Middle East, then I think that the workers and the people that go there would be in danger. Because I don't just suddenly believe that, and listen, this is maybe one of those moments that I disagree with Donald Trump. But I just don't believe that, you're gonna move all of these people to other places and suddenly they're going to see the light and realize, oh, yeah, the United States is wonderful. And can we get jobs working in these hotels and casinos? I mean, I would love it, but I'm very cynical. The Daily Mail reports the report about how this Palestinian territory would turn into a trusteeship administered by the U.S. for the next 10 years, becoming a hub of high-tech manufacturing and technology. They say this comes after the U.S. President Donald Trump held a White House meeting on Wednesday to discuss day-after plans for the Gaza Strip after nearly 2 years of devastating war. According to a 38-page prospectus seen by the Washington Post, Gaza's civilian population would be temporarily relocated, either through voluntary transfers or not so voluntary. They could also, by the way, transfer them to another country or into restricted, secured zones within the Strip during reconstruction. I see that as, how when you build, one stadium next to another stadium, and so the parking has to be maneuvered around. That's kind of how I see this going. So they're going to do, I don't know, whatever, the eastern part of the Gaza Strip. So you've got to move all of those people in the eastern part to the western part. And then when they're done with that, they move them to another part while they build the western part. That's kind of how I see it happening. They say the proposal, though not new, seems to be modeled on President Donald Trump's controversial plan to transform Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East, first touted back in February. Despite global disapproval, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the proposal at the time. But see, here's the thing. They're calling this ethnic cleansing, which I don't believe that it would be. They're basically rebuilding the area so that it would prosper. The plan's fiercest critics, they say, said it amounted to ethnic cleansing pointing to the likely displacement of some 2.1 million Gazans so the U.S. president can transform the rubble-strewn enclave into a billionaire's playground and create lots of jobs. Let's not forget that. Now, the question is, will this ever happen? You think it'll ever happen? I don't know. I mean, those people in Gaza, man, they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave that rubble. There is a guy. So I'm looking at, this is what I did over the 3-day weekend. It was a stellar weekend in my house where, there's all these videos of what is going on in Europe. Because, in Europe, and I'm sure you know this, but in Europe, I mean, they've got all of these, people from all of these Middle Eastern countries. They got a lot of Muslims in Europe. Because over the last 10 years, they've had this massive influx of Muslim men from all of these other countries. I'm calling it as I see it. And the stories of this, and it's awkward to say, and I hate saying it, but it's true. This rape culture, this grooming culture that is going on in Europe because of all of these Middle Eastern men, it is horrifying. And if you say anything, if you tweet anything, if you post anything, then you will get in trouble. You will be accused of breaking the law. It's like the thought police. And they have no freedom of speech there if you are criticizing this massive influx of Middle Eastern men, and their culture is way different, hugely different than that of the West. And so every time you turn around online, you're seeing videos of these Middle Eastern men doing abhorrent things in Europe. And so this is a big problem. In fact, remember, J.D. Vance actually called this out. In particular, the lack of a freedom of speech, where if you say anything, if you say, hey, can we talk about the grooming gangs? That are finding, young women here in the UK, young teenagers who are getting groomed, who are getting raped. Can we talk about this? No? I'll get deplatformed? The government will come after me? Okay. And so that's what's going on in Europe. And it is horrifying. There's a guy named Masab Hassan Youssef, and I may be botching his name, but he is an author. He's an ex-Palestinian militant who defected to Israel in 1997. And then he worked as an Israeli spy and a few other things. But this is a guy, Masab Hassan Youssef, who knows all about what is going on in Gaza. And he spoke at length in a recent interview. I don't know, this was just posted in the last few hours, but he talks about what is going on not only in Europe, but also he speaks about the people of Gaza. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is to let you know the challenges that the world, really, I was going to say America, but the world faces. So while you have all of these people that are out there claiming that Israel is committing genocide, and I sort of debunked that in the last hour, this guy, Youssef, he talks about what he believes they should do with all of these folks from Gaza as they try to rebuild it. Listen very closely to what he says about Europe, because this is fascinating, really is fascinating.
So I don't care where they go. Wherever they go, of course, I prefer that they go to the European countries. You know why? I would like for your hypocrites around the world to finally get to meet the Palestinians for what they are. Because their understanding of the Palestinians, they think that this is just a normal human society that's being oppressed by Israel. I tell them this is a barbaric society where the vast majority agree on evil. We saw them how they were celebrating on October 8th. Nobody can forget this. No matter amount of propaganda around the world can make me forget the Gazans celebrating in the streets, the slaughter and the killing and the kidnapping of innocent civilians.
Well, and let's also, not to pile on here, but let's also not forget the celebration that we saw in that part of the world after our own 9/11.
There is no such thing as civilians in Gaza. And of course, this is not acceptable by what's so-called international law, and I don't give a fuck about the international law. It has been almost 100 years, a century. And what so-called Palestinians don't want to coexist with Israel. They don't want to live in peace. Should we try another 100 years of misery and suffering and bloodshed to come to the same conclusion, same realization? And who's going to pay for this?
Yeah. I mean, listen, he brings up a lot of really good points. And who is going to pay for it? There's a reason why Egypt and Jordan and all of these other nations in the Middle East did not want the Palestinian people. Because they've been there, done that. And it didn't end well for their countries. Because the Palestinians, they'll come in and they'll cause all kinds of problems, just like they're seeing in Europe. With all of these other Middle Eastern men that migrated into Europe over the last 10 years. So they've got a lot of problems. And this guy, Yusuf, hearing him talk about, his experiences with the people of Gaza. I mean, these are very consistent with what we've seen over the past, many decades. One of the things that is seared in my memory is remembering the celebration after 9/11. And, of course, the celebration the day after October 7th. And these are big issues.
The state of Israel, enough is enough. The people here are exhausted of war. And this is the time to seize the moment, to finish this madness. Let them go to hell. I don't care. Wherever they go. And I take responsibility for my words. If they don't want to coexist peacefully and act like barbaric 7th century mentality by the name of jihad, by the name of Palestine, by the name of manipulation. Enough is enough, and I don't care what the world thinks. Yes, let them go to France. They would be the reason of collapse of civilization, wherever you take them. If Egypt does not want to take them, if Jordan does not want to take them, then let Europe take them. Yes, I will be very happy if they go to Europe.
Yeah, so, and his could you tell he doesn't like the Palestinians? And his point is that Europe is seeing a massive, massive problem with their influx of Middle Eastern men. Of course, we have our own immigration problems thanks to Joe Biden and all of the illegal aliens that we have here in our country. Oh, by the way, coming up, I do have an update for you on all things illegal immigration. That is straight ahead. By the way, the phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Bottom line is with Gaza is I don't know what they're going to do with it. I don't know what they're going to do with the 2 million people. But I think Donald Trump has a vision. Do I think that vision will eventually be carried out? Who knows? That area is so war-torn, and you have so many people that they want war. They want the carnage because it's all that they know. And I don't know. I mean, hit me up on the socials, at Dan Mandis Show. Hit me up with a tweet. Send me a direct message, whatever. But would you go? Send me a text. 615-737-9986. Would you go to the Riviera of the Middle East if they turn Gaza into a bunch of casinos and hotels? I'm here to tell you I wouldn't, because it will be dangerous. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE. We'll return next.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on compliance, safety, accountability. Compliance, Safety, Accountability, or CSA, is the FMCSA Safety, Compliance, and Enforcement Program. Its goal is to hold motor carriers and drivers accountable for highway safety and to reduce crashes, injuries, and fatalities on our roads. CSA does this by assessing the safety performance of motor carriers and drivers based on data collected during roadside inspections, crash reports, and FMCSA investigations. Based on the data that is compiled, motor carriers are assigned a score. The carrier is then grouped with other carriers who have had a similar number of safety events. Carrier scores within the group are then ranked to determine intervention priority. Low scores are better, so carriers with the highest scores are those that are most likely to be targeted for intervention by the FMCSA. Interventions range in severity and may include warning letters, roadside, off-site, or on-site inspections, civil penalties, or operation out-of-service orders. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller and Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. I don't even know what to do with this story. Just real quick. From the New York Post. Two friends agree to shoot each other in the head while wearing Kevlar helmets. And now one is charged with murder. Yeah, they had it in the, they thought that they would have fun testing out those Kevlar helmets that say, oh, yeah, we're bulletproof. So they decided to shoot each other in the head to see if there's any truth in advertising. I would love to know how they decided which one would go first. They say two pals took turns shooting each other in the head with a rifle while wearing Kevlar helmets inside of a home, with one man now being charged with the other's murder, according to authorities. You know that they had to be like taping this, right? You know that they did this. Sean O'Donnell, 37 years old. How old? I mean, I'm not laughing. Well, I am laughing. I don't find it funny that a guy's dead. But oh my Lord, what were you thinking, man? So Sean O'Donnell, 37 years old, taken into custody at his home in Houston, Texas, in connection to the shooting death of his friend, 34-year-old Aaron Prout, a native of the UK. The two pals were inside O'Donnell's home, firing at each other with a rifle while wearing the bullet-resistant helmets when this guy was seriously injured and ultimately died. Unbelievable.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
And the phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. Follow me on the socials if you would. That would be appreciated. You can find me on @Dan Mandis Show on X and Facebook, Instagram, and also, believe it or not, TikTok, although I don't dance. The text line, 615-737-9986. That is from my local show in Nashville, Tennessee, where I host a morning show on Soup Talk 99.7 that runs from 6 to 10 Eastern. You can watch it on YouTube if you like, or Facebook or X. Just go and search Super Talk 99.7 WTN, and you can listen to it on all the various streaming platforms. I've never trusted the mainstream media, ever, for so many different reasons, but one of them is because clearly of their bias. And so this next piece of audio is from Kristi Noem, and she's on CBS, and she's talking about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Now, the reason why I am particularly interested in this story is because, as you may or may not know, but, you know, Maryland Man, right? They like to call him Maryland Man. The media love to call him Maryland Man. Well, the reality is that Maryland Man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, was actually from El Salvador, and the authorities there in Maryland, where he came into our country illegally, ends up in Maryland. They say that he was a gang member. MS-13, I believe. And he was caught in my state of Tennessee transporting a bunch of illegal aliens. And the Biden administration, they caught him here in the state of Tennessee. They called the Biden administration at the time, and the Biden administration said, oh, that's okay, you just let him go. You let him go, and the 9 guys in his car, none of them speak English. And the only thing they have to their names, I kid you not, the only thing they had to their names are toothbrushes. And so they call up Biden. They call up Biden's DOJ, and they asked him, what should we do with this guy who is clearly transporting a whole bunch of illegal aliens? And Biden just said, let him go. Let him go. And so then, of course, as you know, Kilmar Abrego Garcia becomes the cause celeb for the Democrats, where everybody was worried about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Then we found out that he was a wife beater, right? Yet you still had people like Senator Chris Van Hollen out of Maryland who were doing everything they could to help not only Kilmar Abrego Garcia, but all of these other illegal aliens who were gang members and so forth. And so Kristi Noem was on CBS. And she was talking about the case that she and others, people here in the state of Tennessee, for example, and at the federal level, the case that they have built against Kilmar Abrego Garcia. So the point is that CBS edited or cut, stop me when you've heard this before, that CBS edited what Kristi Noem had to say so that the accusations and what we do know about Kilmar Abrego Garcia would not air on CBS. This is what did air on CBS. Listen close. Again, this is Kristi Noem talking about Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
And the one thing that we will continue to do is to make sure that he doesn't walk free in the United States of America.
So that is where they stopped the tape. That is where they stopped the interview. Do you want to hear what CBS cut out? Oh, this is classic network television editing. This is what they chose to edit out, CBS. Listen close.
This individual was a known human smuggler, a MS-13 gang member, an individual who was a wife beater, and someone who was so perverted that he solicited nude photos from minors. And even his fellow human traffickers told him to knock it off. He was so sick in what he was doing and how he was treating small children. So he needs to never be in the United States of America, and our administration is making sure we're doing all that we can to bring him to justice.
Why would CBS edit that part out? Why would they edit that out? I think they edited that out because they are so anti-Donald Trump that they didn't want Kristi Noem airing or saying anything that would give justification to Donald Trump wanting to send him to either back to El Salvador or wherever they're going to send him. They didn't want that information out because anything that would back up what Donald Trump has to say and what Donald Trump is trying to do cannot air on CBS because that would mean that CBS, would be helping Donald Trump. And, they can't have that. Nope, can't have that. So I love that Kristi Noem, this was, by the way, if you're not sure where it came from, that's Face the Nation. That is on Face the Nation. And they cut that part out. And it does seem like, if they're looking for the truth, they would allow that to air. Or at the very least, then you could have the host, I don't know who was hosting, but have the host push back on that and say, well, these are only accusations. Okay, if that's what they would want to do. But I don't know why they edited that part out, except the only thing that I can think of is their TDS. By the way, are we about to invade Venezuela? Listen to this headline. Maduro, of course, the Venezuelan president. Maduro claims the United States seeks regime change through military threat amid Caribbean buildup. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on yesterday, accusing the United States of seeking a regime change in his country amid a naval buildup in the Caribbean. The military deployment was authorized by President Donald Trump in an effort to disrupt drug cartel activity as part of his broader border policy. However, Maduro said the buildup is an intervention in his country's affairs. Well, here's the deal, Maduro, is that most Americans who are aware know what you did in sending all of these, illegal alien gang bangers into our country to destabilize our country. I mean, if you do even a modicum of research, you will see that he has weaponized migration. And that's something that I talk about often. I don't know if I've ever spoken about it here on Red Hour Radio as I fill in for Gary and Eric, but weaponized migration, where you have all of these countries like China, countries like North Korea, countries like Iran. They would send their people to Venezuela, and then Maduro would smuggle them into America. And then what they try to do is they try to destabilize America because America is their enemy. Weaponized migration. And Joe Biden allowed it to happen. He encouraged it, to be perfectly honest. And so when Donald Trump says, and I don't know about you, I get tired of the president saying the same thing all the time, but he needs to say it all the time. When he says that Venezuela emptied their prisons, let all of their bad guys into our country. Well, yeah, that was Nicolas Maduro, and that was him trying to destabilize America. Now, I don't know why it is that we are having a naval buildup in the Caribbean. I don't know why that is. I don't believe that we are getting ready to invade Venezuela, but you never quite know. Here's what Maduro told journalists. They are seeking a regime change through military threat. Maduro told the journalists, officials, and uniformed military brass in Caracas, echoing comments last week by his government's representatives at the United Nations. He says Venezuela is confronting the biggest threat that has been seen on our continent in the last 100 years. Maduro added, a situation like this has never been seen. Well, we've never seen, I would say this to Nicolas Maduro. United States have never seen this level of weaponized migration either. And Trump is doing all he can to get the bad guys out of here, especially all of the bad guys from Venezuela, like Tren de Aragua, like the ones that were in Denver and taking over apartment buildings. Maduro, though, said Venezuela will not bow to threats and that it was super prepared. Okay. The Trump administration has accused Maduro of engaging in drug trafficking, going so far as to announce a $50 million reward for information leading to his arrest and his conviction. I mean, I'm with a lot of you folks. Like, I have absolutely no idea why it is that we, and I do understand it is incredibly complicated. But listen, if there are drug cartels that are killing over 100,000 Americans every single year, then yeah, you know what? I believe that we should respond militarily. But I do understand that there's a lot at play. We can't go in and just start bombing the hell out of Mexico as much as I want to. We can't go in and bomb the hell out of, these drug cartels. Although I believe that Donald Trump could make the justification for that. I mean, he took out Iran and their nuclear weapons, their ability to launch nuclear weapons. So why can't we bomb the living crap out of the cartels? Why wouldn't we bomb the living crap out of the cartels? Inquiring minds want to know. And I do believe there's a whole thing about Venezuela, and there's a whole thing, and I don't have the audio right now. Maybe I'll try to play it tomorrow night. I'm in for Gary and Eric all week. But when you start talking about the cartels and you start talking about what Venezuela is doing to destabilize America, then, okay, now listen, I'm not about regime change. I'm not about, going into countries and trying to change their regime, assassinate presidents. I don't think that's what we ought to be doing as a nation. I think we ought to be focused on what we do as America, and putting America first. But here's the deal. If we have a foreign leader who is doing whatever he can and everything that he can to destabilize our country, well, then we would need to take action. But I get it. Because you get rid of Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, you don't know what you're going to get next. You really don't. And the last thing that America needs is to try to do more nation building, nation rebuilding. No. We're going to have our hands full with Ukraine whenever that mess ends. But forgive me if I don't have anything good to say about Venezuela or Maduro and his partners in crime, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping. I have no idea who's running Iran these days. And North Korea. So for me, I think that whatever we can do to intimidate Venezuela, whatever we can do to, just make them a little nervous, scare the living crap out of them, I think that we absolutely do need to do that. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. I'm using my text line this morning that I use for my local show in Nashville, Tennessee. So if you want to chime in, you can by texting in 615-737-9986. I'm Dan, and we'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number. So is it true that Gary is out this week because he's in mourning? Is that what it is? Because apparently, according to Harold, who has found me and sent me an email, says that it is his understanding that Jasmine Crockett has been redistricted out of her congressional seat, which means that she will no longer be Gary's congressperson. So I hope he's going to be okay this week, because that's a pretty big shock when Jasmine Crockett is not going to be your congressperson anymore. I'm sure Gary is actually, to be perfectly honest, obviously, he's got to be thrilled. That's so funny. Listening to Gary talk about Jasmine Crockett being his congressperson, and it's just like this little sliver, this little block. But now I'm sure that Gary's neighborhood and all the neighborhoods around him are going to be much better served without Jasmine Crockett, who, as I once said, rather famously on my local show here in Nashville, I call her Jasmine Crock of shh. But then I stop, and I still have a job. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.